This Colts defensive line got quite a bit of firepower this offseason, and we have a guy here joining us to talk all about it. Let's get to it.
You are Locked On Colts, your daily Indianapolis Colts podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thank you all for tuning in and making us your first listen of the day. This is your daily podcast covering your Indianapolis Colts, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I am Zach Hicks, one half of your favorite duo here over on Locked On Colts. You guys know my work from horseshoehuddle.com, where I'm the most notorious film nerd there is, where my co-host Jake Arthur is our boots on the ground, our credentialed reporter there in the Colts facility. On today's episode, we're going to be talking with D-line coach Eddy McGilvra, a guy who has worked with 3 of the Colts defensive linemen, probably will be more eventually, knowing his track record here. But we're going to kick this bad boy off talking about the new addition to the Colts defensive line room. That's Samson Ebukam, defensive lineman from the San Francisco 49ers. Previously, before that, he was with the Los Angeles Rams. Eddy has been working with him for quite a few years. I know he hasn't worked with him yet this offseason, but knowing Eddy and Samson there, I'm sure you guys will get together. So, Eddy, what can you tell Colts fans about the player they're getting in Samson Ebukam? I think this is a guy where the stats don't tell the whole story, and there's a lot of really good things there on film with him.
Yeah, Colts should be ecstatic to get Samson. He's one of my most favorite guys to work with in the offseason, just simply because he's so technical. All his rushes are very, pre-calculated. He sets people up extremely well. He pushes the pocket with a lot of power. And I think it's very fitting for what the Colts want to do with him. So they should be really excited, man.
Yeah. How long have you worked with Samson now? I know he's been in the league for a couple of years now.
I want to say we got connected in 2019 while he was here with the Rams, kind of a rotational piece for them. I was working out a few of his other teammates at the time, and he kind of just, fit into that group. And I learned a lot from Samson as well. As I'm hoping he learned some stuff from myself. But he's a very pre-calculated person. He'll set people up pretty nasty with his bull rush, and he'll make some plays off of that and push the pocket. Worked with him, I think the most hands-on, I want to say it was that COVID year, 2020. All the facilities were shut down. Not much guys could really do. People were kind of in hibernation and stuff like that. So, we were on the field a lot during that time before he went out to the 49ers and had a pretty good year out there.
Yeah. And that's the big thing with him is, he's gone from that rotational guy, like you mentioned there back in 2018, 2019, when he first got in the league. And he's kind of grown into, last year he was still kind of a rotational guy, but he kind of grew into like a legit pass rusher this past season. Only 6.5 sacks, but I believe it was like 40-something hurries as well. Really got after it. Where have you seen the most growth in his game over the last couple seasons working with him?
Well, I think sacks won't really tell the story with Samson. Like, what he does for the other 4 rushers, whatever it is, in situational stuff. He's going to sacrifice his rush to get somebody else open, or, work his game to his full potential to create space for somebody else to get a one-on-one. And, Samson's just a very selfless person in general and player. So, I think that's what I pick up the most from him, and really looking forward to kind of seeing how he fits into that room out there with, with D-Buck and Kwity and Dayo, and, being able to feed off of how they're working off their rushes. I think it's a huge pickup for them. And something you were probably missing last year.
Yeah, I don't want to talk too much about the player that he is replacing, because there's no good in talking smack here on this podcast or anything like that. But knowing what you know from last year's defensive line group, where maybe the edge wasn't always set, maybe they weren't constantly pushing the pocket, having a guy like Samson in this scheme where it's so wide 9 heavy, and a guy like Samson where every single rush, just even if he's not getting pressure, like he's going to hit his landmarks and he's going to really pinch the pocket. Your experience working with defensive linemen, just how important is that to have a guy like Samson out there, even if he's not getting 100 sacks a season?
It's extremely important. You need that guy that you can rely on to just go do his job every time, hit his landmark on his rush, be where he's supposed to be on his games and his stunts. So like I said, he's going to open things up for a lot of the other guys, and they're going to feed off of his game. So it's going to be great.
Yeah, for sure. So when you've been working with him over the years, obviously you've probably gotten to more technical stuff as the years have gone on and stuff. Actually, moving past the drill work and getting to more like putting some more tools in his toolbox there. What kind of pass rush tools are we seeing with this guy? I know you mentioned the bull rush there, but what else we got with him?
Yeah, he's very technical with his long arm rush. So great hand placement. Rarely misses his mark with his hand placement. And the more so what we work on is just escaping getting off of his bull rushes and using his counters with him. He already kind of has an idea of what his toolbox is and how he likes to work it. Just about muscle memory and creating the reps more so for him because he's been doing it for such a long time. And I think he picked up a bunch of stuff from SF over the last couple of years, being with the Niners and being with that group and that defensive line coach out there. He does an extremely well job coaching those guys up in the pass rush. So, I think he's going to be able to take those things and take it out to Indy this fall and be able to feed those younger guys and show them some of the stuff he's picked up.
Yeah, for sure. I'm excited to see him next. He'll assumably, taking over that Yannick Ngakoue role, still in that wide nine, like we talked about with Kwity and being out in that wide nine quite a bit, but being next to DeForest Buckner. I mean, I think Samson Ebukam, just from my film watching, is a player who's better matched with DeForest Buckner because of that ability to pinch the pocket. Quarterbacks can't escape the pocket when you have a guy like Samson always pinching that edge. And what's crazy is he's not super big. He's not like he's strong. Don't get me wrong.
Strong.
Yeah,
he's strong as shit. He's strong as shit. I'm telling you. He puts his hands on you and you're in trouble. So, he makes up for his size with his explosion and his suddenness. And he's got some long arms to him. He's got some long arms so he can create space and create an edge off of that. But yeah, I agree with you. I think he's going to push the hell out of the pocket. And I think guys like Kwity and Dayo are going to, benefit by getting wider rushes off the other edge.
Yeah, absolutely. So we talked about Dayo Odeyingbo. We're gonna really dive into your work with him because on top of working with Samson Ebukam over the past couple of years, you spent a month and a half with Dayo Odeyingbo this past offseason. So guys, we're gonna talk all about Dayo here in just a second. But first, if you're looking for a delicious snack, but you don't want all the sugar and calories that you need in the best tasting protein bar ever, it's Built. If you're like me and you want to make healthier snack choices, but you don't want to compromise on taste, then I've got the thing just for you. It's Built Bars and Built Puffs. They're healthy and taste amazing. You won't even know that they're good for you. What makes Built Bars so good is that they're covered in 100% real dark chocolate, and they come in unbelievable flavors like churro, peanut butter, brownie, and cookies and cream. Head to your nearest Walmart today, walk to the pharmacy section, and grab yourself a box of Built Bars. You can pick up a 4-bar box of cookies and cream bar, double chocolate bar, or coconut puff. And if you're close to a Sam's Club, run in and grab a 13-bar box of our hit flavors, brownie batter puff and churro puff. You can thank me later. And everydayers, we had an exclusive interview with Colts linebacker Zaire Franklin earlier this week. So if you guys missed that for whatever reason, I know you guys are everydayers and you're here every single morning with us. But if you guys missed that, please go back and listen to it the other day. Zaire Franklin dropped some really great insight on a lot of players and on a couple players we talked about today. So make sure you go back and check out that interview. All right, Eddie. So diving into Dayo Odeyingbo, this is a player where we knew it was going to be a process with him coming in, tore his Achilles coming into his first year, only got a little bit of that season in. And then last year, there were some moments where it started a little slow, but the second half of last season, we got to see the potential that was Dayo Odeyingbo. I think in the last 6 or 7 games, he had, I think it was 4.5 sacks. He had a really, really nice couple of rushes against Zach Martin, of all people, in that Dallas Cowboys game, which I think were the highlights of his season. Dayo Odeyingbo, what did you see from him last year when you were kind of watching the film and talking with him?
I mean, just really relentless, active, you know what I mean? Just motor. Also great power rushes, great counters off his power rushes. He's long, tall, big, strong. Like he's got it all. You can see why they drafted him where they did. But, I think coming off of an Achilles is tough. I think you have a 2-year window, until you really feel like yourself again and you're able to almost mentally trust your body and have those things intertwining into your, everyday routine, just feeling strong and feeling confident to make type of moves that you're used to making. So I think this is really the year you're going to see him, healthy and mentally active to get after the quarterback.
Yeah, for sure. And Dayo Odeyingbo, I think, is such a fascinating prospect because you don't see a player with that athleticism, that length, and that size, move like a defensive end. He moves like a defensive end when he's built like a 3-tech, and he can play inside, and he does a lot of that as well. But you linked up with Dayo last year, and you started working with him a little bit there. But this offseason, you spent a lot of time with him. You told me before we recorded all of the month of February, half of the month of March. You really, really spent time with Dayo. What were you guys kind of working on this offseason now that you guys, you're going to pass the getting to know each other phase of last year?
Yeah, just moving, just movement skills, like, whether it's rushing vertical or inside out move or an outside in or power rushes, hand placement, off of movement. I think I think that was key for him, just getting him moving and getting him active again. And he looked great. I got to say, he looked great from the time he got to me to the time he left. He even hit me and was like, hey, like I saw the improvement as we were going. So I'm excited to get back with you in the summer. I'm excited to get back with him too, because I know there's a lot of stuff he, can still work on to really, clean his plate this fall and make sure he doesn't leave anything on the table.
Yeah, for sure. I think he said the other day in a press conference with Colts media that he's up to 285. So he's already.
He doesn't look it though. He doesn't move like you were saying. He doesn't move like that. He moves like a clean defensive end, like maybe 260. Like he's twitchy and fast for his size. So he's a problem, man. If he gets going, that confidence is gonna change his game.
Yeah, and it's really interesting with him too. Is they added a couple of 3-techs this offseason. And they already have DeForest Buckner. They added Taven Bryan, super athletic 3-tech from the Browns. They drafted Adetomi out of Northwestern, another really athletic 3-tech. And I'm not saying that Dayo is going to get beat out by those guys. And when it comes down to those third down rushing packages, I still assume it'll be Dayo out there with Samson, Kwity, and DeForest. But when you guys were kind of talking or whatever, does Dayo think he's going to be more of a defensive end this season? Like, do you think that where he could be, or do you still think he's going to be more of that defensive end, defensive tackle type role?
I think he's just ready for whatever. He's put himself in a great position physically to be able to play both. And he's in great shape. So I think it's really comes down to really whatever. And I think, it's just situational stuff. He can move inside if he needs to, but I see no issues with him staying on the edge full time. He's fast enough to do it. So I think it just depends. You kind of pick your poison with those guys. They got a great group, and you can't have enough. You got to have more every year.
Yeah, you need to have the waves there. And again, at the end of the day, we probably think the best 4 rushers out there are going to be Samson and Kwity outside with DeForest and Dayo there on the interior. But it's so interesting to have a player like Dayo where they can just be everywhere. We even saw DeForest a couple times line up at defensive end in some packages, but Dayo can be like a legit defensive end. He can get out there. And we talked about with Samson there, those long arms and the strength to hold the edge. But a player like Dayo, he's not losing that edge,
Yeah, no, and he's fast. Like that's the thing too. He doesn't look like your traditional defensive end, but he moves like one. So you're not losing anything by keeping him out there.
Yeah. So when Dayo got with you this offseason, were there any like coaching points that he got from his D-line coach and stuff like that on things to improve on? Or were you guys more of just, again, addressing his movement and working on his movement and stuff like that?
Really just working on his movement and making sure that he's at the right level he needs to be going into OTAs. And then we'll address everything. You go to OTAs, you kind of get a feel for where you're at as a player and, use that time with your teammates and your staff to figure out kind of where you are. And, then you come back in the summertime in June, maybe take a little vacation, decompress a little bit before the season starts. And then we get pretty active in July. So, I think that's more of the time where we'll focus on the things that he needs to do going into the season.
Right. Absolutely. I think this is a big season for him. And I think there are a lot of really good things that he showed last season. In terms of, again, what you kind of saw and what you've worked with him in the past, we talked about with Samson where he's got that long arm and he's got that power. Do you think Dayo is a similar type of player? You got the long arm and the power and some other things like that?
Yeah, but he's gonna, the thing with Dayo though, is that he's so sudden and so big. So like he can beat you inside out, outside in, and get around you pretty quickly, just as well as he can get through you. So, you're going to have to send help his way a lot of the times. And, I think they're going to do a great job of running a lot of games to open people up and try to get guys one-on-ones. I think that's where they'll really cook people.
Yeah. No, that's the big thing with Gus Bradley is, he doesn't bring too much pressure. Like he might bring a 5th guy every now and then, like a player like Zaire Franklin, which I talked about there in our little ad there in the middle. But yeah, a player like Zaire Franklin who's super athletic and get in there. But typically, if Gus Bradley wants to bring pressure or simulate pressure, it's twists, it's stunts.
Yeah.
And now he's got guys where, I mean, you worked with all these guys like Kwity Paye, Dayo Odeyingbo, and Samson Ebukam. I mean, those are probably three of the more athletic guys you worked with, right?
Yeah, I would say so. As far as size, strength, and speed goes, absolutely.
Yeah.
And they were, they all kind of similar. Like Samson and Kwity are very similar in how they rush, and Dayo can really get active inside and outside. So, sky's the limit for that group right there. They can really do some things.
Yeah. At the end of the day, if you don't have a whole defensive line full of Nick Bosa's and DeForest Buckners, like just elite overall players, throw all the shots at the super athletes and just have them gap shoot. And that's what the Colts are going to be doing next year. They're going to be gap shooting with these guys. And it's going to be really fun to watch. But coming up, guys, we're going to talk about Kwity Paye. We're not forgetting about Kwity Paye because that's how Eddie and I actually got linked up in the first place a couple years ago, was talking about Kwity Paye. We're going to talk about him here in just a second. All right, Eddie. So back to our boy, Kwity Paye. Kwity Paye. I don't want to seem like we're forgetting about him because, if you were to stop me about 5-6 games into last year, right up until that Broncos game, and ask me who was the best defender on the Colts, I mean, honestly, Kwity Paye might have had a good argument. I mean, those first 5 or 6 games, he had like 3.5 sacks, led the team in pass rush win rate, led the team in pressures, and was just playing some outstanding football. Then that injury happened near the end of that Broncos game. He came back from it, had a couple good moments here and there, but it's just the whole season kind of got derailed a little bit from there with him. But Kwity, man, he's just a player where I'm so high on. I know you're super high on, and you got to work with him a little bit this offseason, but how much was that injury kind of nagging him last year from your conversations with him?
I mean, you can high ankle sprains for an edge rusher. That's like the worst case scenario because it's not that crazy of an injury, but you got to be able to bend the edge and use your ankle flexibility, mobility, and then the strength goes down. So you're not really trusting it. It's tough. There's no other way to put it. It was a freak play. It was effort play, gets rolled up on, looked way worse than it was. Obviously, I thought the worst. And, I'm just glad it wasn't anything more than that. But, like you said, he was on fire to start. He looked really good. We had worked our asses off. He worked his asses off to get to where he was. And, it's a bummer. But I think that kind of stuff, you can put it as a chip on your shoulder for the next year and get back in the lab and just try to, stay as healthy as possible and just get right back where you left off.
Yeah. He was showing some really good things, and he was looking like the perfect fit for this scheme. Like I was just saying a second ago, having those explosive, long, powerful edge rushers and just rushers in general in this scheme with how much they stunt and how much they twist. Kwity was thriving on that last year. And I know going into last year, you and Kwity were watching a lot of film on former San Francisco stuff and I think it was Robert Saleh's stuff, whatever. You guys were watching a lot of that stuff, getting him ready for the wide 9. And it was looking so good too. It's just, it sucks how injuries happen and derail stuff there. But you did get some field work with him, right, this offseason?
Yeah, I think just the injury part is just part of the game. As a player, you sign up for it. So, you accept what comes with that and you try to take the best care of your body as possible and do all the right things. But some things aren't, just not preventable, freak accidents like that. But yeah, I mean, he was out here in California pretty much the whole month of February, just like, actually, I think he stayed all the way until April. Okay. More so just focusing on his rehab, making sure his ankle was as strong as possible, which it is. And, towards the end of his time here, we were able to get some field work in and, test the ankle. And he looked right back to where he was, like a first-round pick a couple years ago. So look for big things again. I expect huge things from Kwity. He's, he knows what he's capable of, and so do the people around him. So I'm excited for him, just as I always have been.
Yeah, and the fascinating thing about a player like Kwity is, yes, there are guys like Samson where they're super explosive, long, and powerful. And I'm not saying he's stiff by any means. Like Samson Ebukam is not that whatsoever. But I don't think there's many guys that fit that mold like that who are also as bendy and elusive as Kwity Paye. We saw, obviously, everyone's seen the 3-cone time that he was able to put up. You could see it on the film. I mean, just in glimpses where he's turning that corner like an unreal player. When you're training a guy like that, are you training him more like a speed guy? You're training him more like a power guy, or are you just kind of embracing everything that he is?
Well, we definitely try to work off of his strengths, but he has a bag that he hasn't really shown yet as far as his tools to rush. And I think, those are the things you try to unlock as a trainer, as a coach, when you get with guys like him, because he's such a special talent and an athlete. But more so, I think we were just trying to get him moving and being comfortable again on his legs. And, he hadn't really had too much time to do it, but the little time that he did, he looked right back to normal. So, that was great. And then also, Kwity might be one of the best run defenders in the NFL, top to bottom. So, Kwity's always going to have that, and that's going to keep him on the field for a very long time. I just think, this is a huge opportunity now for him to show what he is as a pass rusher. If he can stay healthy, I know those numbers are going to stack up.
Yeah. And, I think guys like Samson and even Dayo and Kwity as well, all three of them are very capable of being 10-sack guys in the NFL. But the beauty of having all of these guys together alongside DeForest Buckner is DeForest Buckner could be your 10-sack, your 11-sack, your 12-sack guy. And those other three guys could be your 5 or 6-sack guys. Like, they don't even have to be 10-sack dudes to be really effective as a group. Because if they're all hitting 5 or 6, just alone on your defensive line there, you're pushing near 30 sacks if you're counting them along with DeForest Buckner. So it's going to be really interesting to see these group of guys really get after it together this next year. I'm sky high, obviously, on all of them. But yeah, I think this is a really good group. And obviously you've worked with all of them there. I don't want to put too much pressure on you here, but who's the best one of the three? Who's the who's the best one long term? Project it 5 years out. Who's got more sacks out of all three of these guys?
I don't know. It's going to be a battle. It's going to be a battle. I think they're going to – honestly, I wouldn't be shocked if they even talk about that. So, I think more importantly than anything else, they're all winners, dude. They're all winners. Like, they want to win badly, and you're going to see that. You're going to see that. I think they're going to take that type of culture into that locker room and that defensive line room. I think all three would tell you that they would, sacrifice a sack for a Super Bowl. Like those sack numbers for Super Bowls. And I think D-Buck would probably say this, he'd probably say the same thing. So, you want that type of mindset going into it. But, I think for guys like Kwity and Dayo coming out of that draft class, this is a huge year for them to be able to put some numbers up and, get paid, which is, obviously a huge priority for all of them. Samson just getting a bag, which was really cool to see. I'm happy for him. But, I think it's time for Kwity and Dayo to get paid, man. They're going to go out there and get their money now.
Yeah. And again, we don't want to throw too much on last year's other piece on the defensive line, but do you really think Samson, I guess I don't want to put too much on like too many words in your mouth here, but do you think Samson was kind of the missing piece to this defensive line under Gus Bradley?
I think you could say the same thing about Kwity probably not getting hurt,
Yeah.
Like I think it's football is so tough because you got to have all 11 guys playing at one beat. The back end's got to cover well for the D lineman to get to the quarterback, and the D lineman got to get to the quarterback fast for the back end to be able to cover well. So it all kind of intertwines together, and that's why this game is so beautiful. But I would love to say yes. I just think I would personally say yes because I think Samson on all 32 teams is a missing piece. So hopefully for him, he gets an opportunity to show that.
Love it. So to close us out here, Eddie, I gotta say, which Colts defensive lineman are you getting next? We have a couple depth guys that you could work with. Taven Bryan's been around for a little bit, super athletic. Adetomi is a young kid. I'm sure you can probably work with. Who's the next guy you're gonna be pulling out there? Because you seem to be grabbing all of the Colts defensive linemen.
They should have drafted one of my guys from this year, but I don't know. We'll see. We got some guys in college still that I'm working with, and. Who it could be next year's class. It could be one of the rookies that they took this year. It just depends, man. My cell phone doesn't stop ringing. So if someone wants to hit me up, Instagram or Twitter, whatever it is, man, I'm willing to work with you. So we'll get active.
Love it, man. All right, we got to get Kwity and Dayo to just drag a couple of these other young kids out there to work with you, and we'll have a whole defensive line group trained under Eddy McGilvra. But Eddie, as always, appreciate your time and you jumping on here. You guys can go follow him there on social medias at DLineCoachEd. And what's your Instagram as well if people wanted to follow you on there?
Same thing, like DL Coach Ed.
Perfect. So you guys go follow him on there, see a lot of updates. And I know there's a lot of videos on Dayo from your work this past offseason as well. So everydayers, make sure you are tuning in to everything that is happening with Locked On Colts this next week. And again, make sure you're following at D-Line Coach Ed on Twitter. If you guys don't already, follow us on Twitter as well at Locked On Colts, at Jake Arthur NFL, and at Zach Hicks 2. Also subscribe to the Locked On Colts podcast on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcast. We'd love your guys' ratings, reviews, and we'll see you guys bright and early on Monday.